confrontation with India. I think that's quite clear. I think one of the most eye-catching things for me was the way that this blew up. We had a infrastructure, essentially, a road-building project in that territory, and this reflects very much the current strategy for some of the Chinese leadership. They have this very awkwardly named One Belt, One Road strategy, which is massive infrastructure projects unfurling to China's west, and some see that as a way of establishing a footprint and then using that to justify historical claims. Some say that's what was going on here.
Sanjoy Majumdar in Delhi and the BBC's Robin Brandt in Beijing. Now to a story involving one of Asia's richest men. The Chinese billionaire Wang Jianlin's company, Wanda, has a global business portfolio stretching from real estate and film studios to football teams and even a British luxury yacht company. Now, Wanda is busy denying rumours that Wang Jianlin and his family were detained by Chinese police as they attempted to fly to London. For more on the whereabouts of Wang Jianlin, I'm joined in the studio by our Asia-Pacific editor, Michael Bristow. So, Michael, what are the rumours and what has Wang Jianlin said about them?
Well, you hinted at them there in the intro to this report. Wang Jianlin and his family were apparently, the reports say, flying out to Britain from an airport in Tianjin on a private jet. They were stopped. The billionaire was detained for a number of hours and released, but told he wouldn't be able to leave China. That news came out on a American-based website, Chinese-based American website on Sunday. On Monday, the company, Dalian Wanda, as you've just described, issued a statement completely denying the rumours, saying they were groundless, nothing to them. However, shares and bonds associated with the company plummeted on Monday, recovered slightly afterwards, but certainly people who've invested money in the companies are slightly worried about this.
Tell me more about Wang Jianlin. He's quite a colourful character, isn't he?
Very colourful character. He spent some time in the army, then he went into administration in Dalian. He started up a company in 1989. Essentially, it's a property company, entertainment company. He's one of China's most prominent billionaires, not just because of the amount of money he's got, but because his company's invested across the world and invested in areas which are liable to capture the attention. So in football clubs, as you mentioned, in Hollywood production companies, in big hotels, that kind of thing. So certainly he's a very high-profile character.
Wanda has stepped away from some of its major investments in recent months. What's the story there?
Well, this news about Wang Jianlin's supposed detention doesn't come as a complete surprise, because over the past couple of months, as you've indicated there, his company has been under scrutiny and pressure. It's sold off a number of hotels and tourism sites within China. Just last week, it backed away from a property project here in London. So there's concerns about whether it's borrowed too much money. There's also a change in the political wind in China. The leadership really doesn't want its businesses to get too involved in buying these big trophy assets abroad. And so there's been a lot of speculation about the company. So this news isn't particularly surprising.
Okay, thank you. That was our Asia-Pacific editor, Michael Bristow. Now, a new possible wonder drug, which could prevent thousands of heart attacks, is being hailed as the biggest breakthrough since statins. It's also claimed that the new drug could dramatically reduce the chances of dying from cancer. Details of the research behind the drug have been announced at the annual conference of the European Society of Cardiology in Barcelona, from where I'm joined by Professor Metin Avrakan from the British Heart Foundation. Professor, what can this new drug do, and why is it being hailed as a breakthrough?
So the main reason why the results of this study are being hailed as a breakthrough is that the drug actually targets a completely new mechanism. So the study investigated the effects of this drug in just over 10,000 high-risk patients who already have heart disease and have in fact already had a heart attack. But they also had persistent indication of ongoing inflammation. Now, inflammation in the coronary arteries that supply the heart is associated with a greater risk of a heart attack. So these patients were then treated with this new drug. It's important to note that the vast majority of them, over 93% of the patients, were already on high-dose statins. and the addition of this new drug actually reduced the risk of having another heart attack or a stroke, or indeed dying from those events by a further 15%.
So some quite profound findings there. Does the drug come with any disadvantages?
There has been reports or observations of a small increase in deaths due to infection, because inflammation is part of our body's response to infection. It's part of the defense mechanism. So that needs further attention. When the investigators were actually looking for potential adverse effects of the drug, what they actually observed was a significant reduction in the incidence of things like arthritis, gout, and most interestingly, fatal cancers.
So how long before you think we will see this drug on pharmacy shelves for ordinary patients?
I think more investigation is necessary. At the moment, the cost of this drug is very high. It's been estimated in the US, for example, that it would cost upwards of $200,000 a year to treat each patient, and that obviously is not amenable to widespread application. So I think there needs to be greater investigation of the cost effectiveness of this treatment before it is more widely available.
Okay, thank you. That was the British Heart Foundation's Professor Metin Avkiran. You're listening to the BBC World Service. First, Marion has the headlines.
Indian security forces have been deployed in large numbers as a controversial religious leader has been sentenced to 10 years in prison for rape. The authorities in the US city of Houston have ordered tens of thousands more people to leave their homes as floodwaters continue to rise following a catastrophic storm. And China says Indian forces have withdrawn from a disputed border zone after a tense standoff.
Now to India, where, as we heard in the news bulletin, a controversial guru found guilty of raping 2 women has been sentenced to 10 years in jail. The verdict against Gurmeet Ram Rahim Singh last week sparked violence by his followers. More than 80 people were killed, and security forces have been deployed in large numbers to prevent a repeat of the unrest. Live now to our correspondent in Delhi, Sanjoy Majumdar. Sanjoy, so the guru has been sentenced to 10 years. That's more than the minimum of 7 years.
Yes, that's right. During the hearings preceding the sentence, lawyers for the prosecution had actually asked for the maximum sentence possible, which was life imprisonment. His defense lawyers argued in turn that he was, in their words, a social reformer and therefore should be treated leniently. And then after hearing those arguments, the judge finally came out with the 10-year sentence that was handed out. Extraordinary scenes preceding the sentencing, which itself took place in a specially prepared courtroom inside the prison in which Gurmeet Ram Rahim Singh has been kept since Friday evening. This is on account of the extraordinary security situation that we find ourselves in because of the riots that took place on Friday and the tension that's prevailed since over the weekend and even leading up to the sentencing. The courtroom itself was surrounded by thousands of security personnel. All access to the town in which it was located was restricted. Mobile internet services, text messaging services have been suspended in the area for 3 days. Clearly, the authorities wanted to take absolutely nothing to chance ahead of this very critical decision.
I mean, it sounds like that the courts, the police and the army have been under pressure with this case. Are there fears of more violence?
Well, the next thing that people are looking out for is actually taking place in a town close to where the sentencing took place. It's where the headquarters of Guru Ram Rahim Singh sect is located. My colleague Justin Rowlatt is there and has been reporting that something like 15,000 security personnel, that includes army troops, have surrounded his estate. It's about 1,000 acres in size. Now, over the weekend, several thousand of his supporters have been trickling out after the army made appeals asking them to leave. But we understand that 5,000 to 10,000 of his hardcore supporters are still inside the premises. And the police have told us that once the sentence was announced, they would prepare to actually enter the premises. So the concern very much is of the kind of reaction and response they're likely to face once they go in.
OK, thank you for speaking to us again, Sanjoy Majumdar. Now to South Africa, where the farming town of Escourt in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province came to a standstill today for the court appearance of 5 men linked to bizarre cannibalism. They're charged with murder, attempted murder, and being in possession of human body parts. The BBC's Nomsa Maseko was there for the hearing and spoke to us from outside the courthouse. I should warn you that some of the details she gave us about the case are gruesome.
Just a brief history of why they are being charged is because a traditional healer approached the police a few days ago saying that he was tired of eating human flesh, and when police did not believe him, he took out a severed hand, a bleeding hand and a foot, and put them on the table in the police station saying, "This is your proof, arrest me now." And only after that did police take him seriously. He then led them to the house where he has been practicing traditional healing from, and he also led police to some of his accomplices who he has been working with around the area. I'm sure you can also hear people talking just behind me here. There are hundreds of people lining up the streets outside this courthouse here in Escort. These people are saying they're not going anywhere until they see the suspects. They will be driven out shortly. It could go wrong because police are just preparing tear gas. They're also having rubber bullets on them just in case the crowd starts shouting. I'm sure you can hear now the van that is carrying the suspects is now being driven out. They are now being taken to prison. The people who have gathered here, some were happy that the suspects are abandoning their bail application, but others are demanding that the suspects be released back into the community because this community says that they want to take their law into their own hands.
Nomsa, can you describe the scene more for us? Who is gathered outside the courtroom?
Well, it's mostly women who live in this community because women say that they are the most vulnerable. They are the ones who get attacked even more. This comes because not so long ago, a woman, a 25-year-old, was found decapitated with both her feet missing, one hand missing, and she was disemboweled. And what it looks like, the traditional healer told the police that when this woman was killed, her liver and her heart was fed to his client, who he told them would be rich and invincible and powerful if they ate human body parts.
The BBC's Nomsa Maseko. Now, Marion has some other stories from our news desk.
Lawyers acting for the heir to the South Korean technology giant Samsung have filed an appeal against his conviction for bribery. J.Y. Lee was found guilty on Friday and sentenced to 5 years in prison. His appeal is expected to be heard next month. Mr. Lee was convicted of bribing the ousted South Korean president, Park Geun-hye, to secure government favours to help him gain control of the Samsung group. He's been the de facto head of Samsung since his father suffered a heart attack in 2014. The Vatican has announced that Pope Francis is to visit Myanmar and Bangladesh later this year. The leader of the world's 1.2 billion Catholics will visit mainly Buddhist Myanmar in late November and mostly Muslim Bangladesh in early December. A lost collection of letters from the Second World War codebreaker Alan Turing has been found in an old filing cabinet in an English university. They include a letter from the British Intelligence Agency, GCHQ, and invitations to lecture in the United States. Turing's story was made into a major film, The Imitation Game, in 2014. Professor Jim Miles, who found the files, says they provide a unique insight into Turing's genius.
He imagined things, I think, a long time before many other people imagined them. He was so far ahead of his time, but he laid down some very fundamental principles of computer science about algorithms, about computability, and about artificial intelligence, which really created the subject.
A Scottish international footballer has been treated for hypothermia after falling into a river in the city of Glasgow. Police say Gary Mackay-Stephen had to be rescued from the River Kelvin in the early hours of Sunday morning. According to reports, the 26-year-old had been celebrating his Aberdeen team's victory over the Glasgow side, Partick Thistle.
Next to Texas, where frantic rescue efforts are continuing following unprecedented flooding from Tropical Storm Harvey. Rescuers in the city of Houston are stretched to the limit as they try to reach the thousands of people who've been stranded as the waters continue to rise. Lieutenant Commander Scott McBride is a spokesman for the U.S. Coast Guard.
This is an all-hands-on-deck evolution for the United States Coast Guard and the federal government. We currently have 16 helicopters that are continuing round-the-clock conducting search and rescue efforts. We have an additional 9 helicopters that are en route to assist. We've received over 2,000 phone calls throughout the greater Houston metropolitan area requesting assistance. They're calling from their homes, from rooftops. We've rescued folks off the roads from their vehicles. They've been stranded.
The hurricane is also having a big impact on America's offshore oil production in the Gulf of Mexico. With the details, here's our business reporter, Vivian Nunes.
Offshore production and some onshore facilities have been shut down because of this storm. The big tankers that carry crude oil to the refineries can't get into the ports. The Port of Houston has a number of terminals and they're all closed. Also, the pipelines around Houston that carry the crude oil to the refineries have been shut down as well. That's going to have a knock-on effect when it comes to exporting that oil and gas. Laura Blewett is a Houston-based reporter and she follows the oil industry for Bloomberg.
We now see about 2 million barrels of the refining capacity in my area is offline, roughly 10% of the total U.S. refining capacity. So we are going to see shortages very quickly here. Oil goes as far as to China. We also export a lot of fuels, so diesel and gasoline. Mexico is one of our biggest customers. We also send to South America and we send diesel to Europe. It's going to be felt all around the world.
Now, remember when Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf of Mexico back in 2005? Well, the oil sector was hit hard then. Hurricane Katrina and 4 weeks later, Hurricane Rita together destroyed more than 100 platforms and destroyed another 50. This time round, the market has changed a lot in the US. There's been a lot of shale extraction, and that's meant a lot more exporting of oil and gas products. And that's why this shutdown of the port is very damaging. The Port of Houston is expected to be shut down for another 2 days at least. It'll take a couple of days to get up and running again when it is open, so it's not expected to be open again before the end of the week.
The BBC's business reporter, Vivian Nunes. The third round of Brexit talks will begin in Brussels in the next few hours, but the UK and the European Union say there's little hope of a breakthrough. The clock is ticking with several key issues that need to be resolved by October. Brussels has accused Britain of magical thinking on the matter of the boundary between the Irish Republic and Northern Ireland, which will become a land border with the EU after Brexit. For the UK, it says the Europeans are massively over-egging the financial obligations Britain must meet before departure. And the EU wants the rights of its citizens living in the UK to be set out before trade talks can start. With more, here's our Brussels correspondent, Adam Fleming.
You can chart the progress of this process through my big, red, ever-growing Brexit binder, a file of all the important documents from the speech given by the Prime Minister Theresa May in January when she set out her red lines.
What I am proposing cannot mean membership of the single market. European leaders have said many times that membership means accepting the 4 freedoms of goods, capital, services and people.
To the EU's guidelines for the negotiations produced by the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk.
Today my task is to propose the draft negotiating guidelines on Brexit to the 27 EU leaders. To the 27, because from Wednesday, after triggering Article 50, the United Kingdom is now on the other side of the negotiating table.
The hole punch got a lot of use early in the summer as the EU side published a blizzard of documents on citizens' rights, principles for calculating the UK's financial obligations, and a host of technical issues.
Adam Fleming there. The stereotypical image of British drinking habits has them knocking back little more than tea and lukewarm ale. But people in the UK have a new alcoholic obsession, and it's not doing their teeth any favours. Here's Jonathan Savage.
In pubs, at weddings and across the dinner party table, more and more British drinkers are toasting their health with Prosecco. Sweet, fizzy and sharp, the Italian wine is a more affordable version of champagne. Price-conscious British boozers are knocking back litres of the stuff. Last year, 1/3 of the world's Prosecco was consumed in the United Kingdom, helped by bumper harvests that have seen production increase by almost 45%. The trend, however, is worrying the nation's dentists, who warn that the combination of sugar, acid and alcohol is a damaging cocktail. Here's Dr. Mervyn Druin of the London Centre for Cosmetic Dentistry.
If you sip it all day, you've got all the items that would cause decay. You start forming little white lines at the gum margins. It's where the enamel is weakest and becomes softer. And if that continues, those white areas will become dark and you'll start getting proper decay. And the thing is, of course, not to go and brush your teeth straight after a glass of Prosecco. Wait an hour or so, let the enamel remineralize, brush your teeth then.
If you think I'm exaggerating the British mania for Prosecco, you should note well what's been happening in the last few days. The budget supermarket Lidl had a special offer. 6 bottles for £20. That's about $26. It led to queues before 7 in the morning and shelves reportedly being cleared in 2 minutes. Dentists say you don't have to give up Prosecco completely, just to take it easy and stick to the odd glass. But with sales going from 2 million litres in 2009 to 77 million litres last year, that advice may be hard to hear over the sound of chinking glasses.
You've been listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service with me, Celia Hatton. Join us again at 12 hours GMT.
This is the BBC World Service, where now we're looking up.
The sky over my backyard looks so close tonight. I don't need a telescope to marvel at the vastness of the heavens.